Hi everyone, it's James here from Belvoir, Northwich. We're at Let Alliance today, our partner that offers tenant referencing and rent guarantee. I'm here with Joe Dickens. We're just going to explain a little bit more about the rent guarantee product and what the benefits are. So hi Joe, how are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks James. Nice to see you. Socially distanced, of course.
Socially distanced, of course. I'm going to run through a few questions then with you, Joe, just to explain a little bit more about the product and what it can do as benefits for our landlords. Okay, so without further ado, what exactly is covered under the rent guarantee scheme?
Well, what I'll try and do today, James, is keep it really simple and really high level. Rent guarantee essentially does two things. Rent guarantee is there to pay the rent to you as the letting agent in the event that the tenant fails to pay, which ultimately your landlord can benefit from. So it's there to pay that rent, it's there to make sure that you and the landlord are not out of pocket, and it also covers all of the associated legal costs which are incurred in regaining possession of that property as a result of the tenancy breach, i.e. the tenant not paying the rent or any other breach, for example subletting or using the property for criminal activities or anything like that. It will cover the costs of getting that property back to make sure that a new tenant can move in. Excellent.
What are the benefits of rent guarantee?
I'd say, with the rent guarantee that you guys offer, it's really, really simple for the landlord. The landlord doesn't need to get involved with claiming on an insurance policy. The landlord literally benefits from this as part of your management service. So alongside the management service, if that tenant defaults on the rent, you will chase the tenant for the rent. If the tenant still fails to pay that rent, you will lodge a claim with Let Alliance and we'll actually pay you that rent for up to 15 months or until the tenant's gone, whichever's the sooner. We cover all of your costs in regaining possession of the property as a result of that tenancy breach. We also help you with the service of the legal notices. We arrange for court representation to represent you at court in trying to get that property back. And what we'll also do is we will pay the rent at 75% of the AST level for up to 3 months after possession's been gained. So if that tenant's moved out and the property is left in a mess, we can then help you to make sure your landlord's not out of pocket during that void period. So that's us paying up to 75% while that property's being remarketed.
Sounds very useful. Next question is, what could be the consequences for landlords who choose not to take out rent guarantee?
Well, I suppose it depends on the profile of the landlord, James. I think for a landlord with a mortgage, it could be absolutely catastrophic. I mean, ultimately, you could end up with a tenant sat in your property, not paying the rent, and with you having to actually pay to evict that tenant and pay the mortgage. Now, I know that, speaking personally, I wouldn't have potentially 7 or 8 months worth of mortgage payments sat in my savings account to be able to pay my mortgage if my tenant wasn't paying the rent. I've also got to be mindful of the fact that even if the tenant isn't paying, in the absence of any incoming rent, I've still got a duty under that tenancy agreement to make sure that property is correctly maintained. So if the boiler breaks down, I've still got to find the money to pay for the boiler. Excuse me. The other thing I would add is it's the legal costs, and the legal costs to get a tenant out are not insignificant. You're talking £1,500 to £2,000 just to get to the point of a hearing. Wow. And potentially going down the route of eviction. And then if a tenant then fails to go, you're back to court again to get a bailiff.
Right, yeah.
So, there's all these different things to consider. And, I've heard landlords say to me before now, well, I don't need rent guarantee because I haven't got a mortgage. Well, okay, you haven't got a mortgage, but you've still got to pay your insurance.
Of course,
you still might have to pay your ground rent, your service charge, all these other things I mentioned before about boiler breakdown, gas safety certificates, electric safety certificates. It's all got to be paid for. So, in the absence of rent coming in, apart from the principle of, why is it fair that someone's sat in your property and not paying you a penny, it could have real catastrophic consequences for a landlord.
Yeah, sounds like that's great. Next question, Joe, is can we, on behalf of a landlord, take out the policy midway through a tenancy?
Yeah, you can. So if you, for example, had a landlord who approached you and wanted to add the Belvoir rent guarantee onto their management service offering, they absolutely can do. They just need to let you know. There are some bits of criteria. Obviously, we can't take on a tenant who's in arrears for obvious reasons.
Of course not now.
We would want to see evidence of clear rental history for sort of 6 months plus, and we'd need to see that they'd been appropriately referenced and things, and that there was a formal agreement in place, which is obviously why the landlord's coming to you guys. But yeah, effectively we could look to put it in place mid-term.
No, that's very useful, and it sounds sensible, that does. So last question then, Joe. What in your experience has the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic had on tenants' ability to meet rental payments?
Oh, good question. And I'm not going to say I'm not going to say that we're out of the woods yet either.
No.
You know, we feel like things are normalising. We feel like you know, everything's getting back to how it was pre-COVID, and then something else happens. You know, I myself was at a conference a few weeks ago, and a couple of people have come down with COVID since been really quite poorly, and you know, we yet to see, I think, the true impact of what COVID's had on tenants. You know, I think there are tenants whose ability to pay the rent has been affected up to now and will be affected in the future. Our claims, as you can imagine, claims notifications went from, you know, being quite static to literally leapt to our team dealing with probably in excess of about 1,000 claims at one point. Now, over time, what we've been amazed at is landlords and tenants' ability to work together, to agree rent deferrals, to agree payment plans and things like that, which you can work with, especially if you know you've got that safety blanket that if ever it isn't paid, you're still going to get paid. You know, tenants generally will try to pay the rent, but you get some who, quite frankly, just take the mick and could pay but choose not to. Mm-hmm. We've noticed that a lot of tenants who were in very sort of high level professional positions, who sailed through referencing, you know, originally, have really struggled to pay the rent because of the situation they found themselves in. You know, there were companies who knee-jerked and did structural things before they knew about things like the furlough scheme coming in. So there have been people who've been victims of redundancy and things like that. And then there's also the things that all sit outside of COVID-19. You know, the situation changes that happen, like marital breakups, poor health, people's needs to move to different areas. There are so many different things that can impact people's ability to pay the rent. And I think we've got to be really mindful of that.
Of course, yeah.
What COVID's taught us is, you know, it's about working with tenants. It's about trying to negotiate with them, trying to maintain contact with them, trying to get them to pay. We don't want to make anybody homeless. But ultimately, if they can't pay, and, you know, we have seen a lot more over the last 18 months, 19, 20 months, is it? You lose track of time. We've seen a lot more who haven't been able to pay. And, you know, unfortunately, that's where we've had to step in. We've had to make contact with them. And if we've been unable to get to a point where we can negotiate the surrender of the property, and we've had to go down the route of going to court, that's where, you know, we've supported our agent customers, helped them support their landlords by getting the eviction orders so that people can get their properties back.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense what you've said there, Joe. So thanks so much for answering those questions very comprehensively.
No problem. No problem.
To the viewers out there, I hope you've enjoyed this session. If you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us on the number on the website. As Joe says, it's very important as a landlord to make sure you are covered against tenant default. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll speak to you soon.